Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Austin McMillan. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks so much, Rocky. I'm fired up to be here.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, born and raised in Alabama, live in Birmingham currently. I got married. Actually, we're celebrating 10 years this year. So, got married 10 years ago. And we have a little 10-month-old little girl, actually. So, I'm rocking the dad life and one little girl, and hopefully more on the way. And so, we're just loving this season of life. She's kind of changed the dynamic a little bit. So, it's been a lot of fun. And then, yeah, so from a business standpoint, it's funny, Rocky. I've experienced just a ton of stuff over since post college, basically trying to just figure out how the Lord wired me and what I love doing, what I don't love doing. So I kind of tell people I dive into the deep end to figure out, do I like doing it or do I not like doing it? So worked for a landscape company on the acquisition side or the financial side. That's kind of where I fell in love with finances for 7 years. And we were owned by an investment group and went through tons of acquisitions over that time period. So just kind of got to see it, be a fly on the wall to a lot of different transactions and business purchasing and things like that. And then from there, traded options in the stock market for a few years, realized that I didn't love that. And then that led me into what is now Flywheel Financial. So I've always been a numbers person, math person, very similar to you, Rocky. And so love spreadsheets. And so ended up trying to help grow a friend of mine's business that ultimately became Flywheel Financial. So offered to buy it from him in the end of 22. And we closed and bought the business in May of 23 and just been growing it since and loving it. So it's been super fun just understanding what business ownership means, what it means from a standpoint of finances and marketing and team building and all the things. So it's been a fun journey, Rocky, but I'm learning every day.
Congrats on that. Let's actually take a step back. So when
Yeah.
you were working for the firm that was buying up the other companies,
Mhm.
when they go to buy a company, what are they looking for? Like, what's their buy box? What sets them off to go, oh, that's a great company to buy?
Yeah. So they were looking, so we're in the landscape industry and they were looking for mom and pop businesses that were in specific markets that they wanted to go into. So I think the first criteria is what city do we want to go into? And does that city meet the criteria of a city that we would want to go into? And so they had certain buy boxes just on the city. And then as you went into the city, then you're trying to figure out what are the major players in that city and do we have the potential to grow at the rate that we want to grow at in that particular city that we're going into. And so from there, they were looking really just to kind of shop around from a standpoint of certain revenue criteria and things like that. But then they were diving into once we know kind of the buy box of the revenue side, then how do we go into the business evaluation side to figure out what that business is now worth to then go into presenting an offer and walking in that. I'm more than happy to kind of dive into the details of that because it's just fascinating to me. I love the idea of business purchasing just because I feel like a lot of people don't really know about it. It's a great way to like build wealth and get into that whole world of business ownership. And so I got to kind of see from being a fly on the wall of what that looked like from an investor side of what they were looking at from those markets.
So when they go in from the investor side, what are they like? They've determined, hey, this business has enough revenue that we want to buy it. What are the things that they're then looking at closer next?
It's all about contractual revenue that they were looking at because it's funny, Rocky, you and I are in similar businesses, but it's like when you get into this mom and pop business world, obviously, and they were in the landscape industry, you can't really trust the books of things that you're getting from a P&L and balance sheet over the last 5 years that you want to analyze, right? And so they were literally looking at saying, okay, it's a very relational business. And so what does the contractual revenue look like from your customer base? And then we're going to figure out a multiple of revenue based off of that, just because it was so hard to judge a multiple of EBITDA or something like that, where their profit, if their books were actually accurate on what they were doing. Just because, from the firm standpoint who owned, the landscape company, they knew based on this revenue, this is what we could do in profit based on this contractual revenue or the potential to grow that contractual revenue. And so they were very keen on that.
So when you say contractual revenue, you're talking contracts they had signed for recurring revenue over a season, basically.
That's exactly right. I mean, it could be anywhere from a 1 year to a 3 year to a 5 year contract. Especially in the commercial space and the landscape world, you could do 3 year and 5 year contracts for some of these guys. And they were looking at that to say like, okay, well, who's going to be a continual customer as we continue on board? And then another part of it is when they were going in and looking at these landscape buildings, because it's so relational, they were also offering incentives to the current owner to stay on for an additional 12 months after the purchase. So there were certain incentives to say like, hey, if you continue and help strengthen these relationships as the new man comes in town and rebrands and does all the things, if you can keep a certain, I mean, they had a percentage basis, but if you keep a certain percentage of clients after 12 months, then you get an additional bonus on top of that. So they knew what it would take to kind of get roots in the ground in those new cities.
Now, granted, you can look at revenue. The question, though, is how did they know if the revenue was appropriate for the job? In other words, hey, I got a contract, it's $1,000 a month, but it's 5 acres or 50 acres is very different.
Yeah, 100%. So that was part of the due diligence, right? When you would dive in to see the contractual revenue. And one thing I forgot to separate is they always separated contractual revenue and assets. And so it was literally just we're buying relationships and then we're going to evaluate the current set of assets that are at the company to see what that valuation is as well. And that was more my criteria when I would come in on this. I was evaluating these assets to say, is it worth buying? Is it worth just saying we're not going to offer pennies on the dollar for some of these mowers or trucks or whatever? And then they were looking at the contractual revenue as the main purchase of that business. But yeah, that was part of the due diligence, just to go walk properties, analyze exactly what it looked like before we ever even put in an offer, to say like, hey, is this actually what it is and what it should be based on our numbers and our skill set.
What did you find most of the time? Was it what it was supposed to be, or did you notice a lot of variation there?
It was a combination of both, but here's the kicker, and I think this is why that stuff was very important. But when you go out and the businesses that they were looking to buy, it wasn't this crazy, crazy big number off of a multiple of revenue. And so in reality, what this company was continuing to offer these business owners is, if you stayed in business another 2 years, you would probably make more than what we were offering to buy it for, right? As an owner of that business. And so it was more of just not necessarily a fire sale, but it was like, hey, these guys are either looking for retirement, looking for an exit strategy, kind of sick of running a business. And so they could offer them a percentage that would get us into the game in that market. But it wasn't like if we overpaid or underpaid by some margin because of the contractual revenue was slightly off. It wasn't that hard to make back up once you put in the new systems and processes and rebrand and kind of put the whole team in place.
Like you said, they were buying fire sale. Well, I mean, because you think about it, if I'm a business owner and I'm making $500,000 a year, what you're telling me is you're barely going to pay me $1 million for that business at the top end.
Yeah, that's right. So
that's not a lot of money.
It's not. And so, but what's interesting about that space, Rocky, is that like people were saying yes to those deals, right? And so it was very interesting to me when you went into there, because I'm like, man, this person's built a business over 10, 15, 20 years. And he's getting to a place where maybe he's, making a decent amount of money, maybe not. And at the end of the day, I think when you look at that, the businesses that they were buying were not the most profitable businesses. So that owner was probably not making that kind of money that you're talking about, right? And so, and a lot of times they were just like, hey, I'm burnt out from working the long hours as a business owner, not making the money that I wanted to make as I thought at building this business. And that wasn't always the case, right? But it was a lot of times when we got into these businesses, you could buy them for cheaper than you could think. And honestly, this is why I'm such a proponent of business buying, because you can get into business deals for less than you think. Honestly, for the same amount of money that a lot of times people put up for a home, you could actually buy a business that could pay you a lot more than your home's ever going to pay you. And start playing in the game of business. So it's a fun conversation to have. But I was shocked, like you, to say like the numbers were drastically lower than I thought.
I'm not shocked. I just want the listeners to know that selling their business may not be the exit they expect it to be. And that's why you need to be profitable and remove 100%. Cash from your business, because then you don't have to worry about your business value. And it does go up and down. And there are, when you go to sell a business, there's a million things that you got to deal with, and it's never fun and pretty.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But it's a great point, Rocky, to your point. I mean, this is why being profitable as a small business is so valuable, because when you have clean books and you can prove your profit, that immediately increases massively the sticker price if you ever work to sell. So I love it.
So now when you guys bought the business, do you know how they were able to increase margin, profit, and so forth once they bought it?
Yeah, a lot of it was systems and processes, right? A number of different ways. And I was involved in portions of it, but systems and processes, right? So we had a whole when you arrive on a property, here's the checklist of exactly what you do. Here's the optimum amount of people per property based on the acreage or the square footage that they're going in. So a lot of that was honed in just from being in the world for a long time. And then the other side of it was we were coming in. It was rare that we would go in and either pay a lot of money or buy any of the current assets for that was in that world, right? And so, or in that business that we were buying. And you think about anybody that's potentially selling a business, a lot of times if they know they're going to sell a business and start marketing that, they're probably not going to be buying brand new trucks in the last year of that business or new mowers in the last year of that business, right? So we knew what we were getting into when coming in to buy those businesses. And so a lot of times we would just say like, hey, none of that stuff is worth anything to us. We're going to bring in all new trucks, all new equipment. And obviously we had the buying power because we were a lot bigger company to start bringing in deals on the asset side that immediately could allow for a more efficient run of what we were doing. So I think it was just a combination of systems and processes plus how we structured assets to start coming in. And then really we had a whole team dedicated to just growing, right? So it's like a lot of these landscape companies, mom and pop businesses over these different areas, they just grow through word of mouth, right? But we had a whole team dedicated to, we're going to get the name out there and really try to grow, and a strategy behind getting to the commercial space.
Now, if you happen to be in this space, this is what your competition is doing, and this is how they're working against you. So you got to figure out how to compete, how to win, because you can win. There's no
Yeah,
ifs,
that's
ands,
right.
and buts about it. You just got to figure it out for you. And so I think that's the important thing. And if you do these things right, the thing people hate that I love is systems and processes and checklists. I mean, I use them in my business for me. And
Yep,
so I realize the value that they create. And when you do that, life gets easier, business doesn't burn you out, things get done, and everything is worth more and you make more. So
that's
you
right.
get the choice, someone else is going to buy you for pennies and make money, or you make money.
That's
Speaking of
exactly right.
making money, we love profit first. I hear you do too. So tell us a little bit about that. What got you into profit first?
Yeah, so read the book, obviously in your background years ago, fell in love, even before buying Flywheel, read that book and just fell in love. And like I said earlier, I've always been a numbers guy, so it just made sense to me up front. And then as soon as we bought the business, I just knew that that was something we were going to implement from internally for us. And so really the heart behind it is it just, like I said, made sense. You're allocating dollars every time dollars come in to certain buckets. So you just know exactly where you stand in one view of your bank accounts, which is such a beautiful thing. And so it was something that I knew I wanted to run. And then I was going to make sure it worked well internally for us. So we shifted. It's not always to the book, to the T, exactly how he talks about in the book, but we had to cater it to exactly what fits our business needs and what we wanted to do to ultimately make as much profit as we could. And then anything that we've learned internally, I try to pass along to our clients as well. Just say like, hey, this is how we're currently running things. Let's think about your business and how it runs, and how can we potentially implement it with your guys.
The book was written so that you could hand out a recipe,
Yeah, that's good.
right? But the reality is the people who actually use profit first and use it well adjust that recipe to
That's
them.
right. Yep.
And so they make it work for them. And I think that's where people get confused. The second thing is, for whatever reason, people just don't understand how to set up their allocations and what the appropriate amounts are and all the things that are missing from their P&L when they try and do that and so forth. So, yeah, I think you have to adapt it to make it work for your business in the way that your business works. I don't want people to fit into a system. I want the system to fit into them. And so I'm a big fan of that. There's a bunch of other things that I know you do that I happen to love as well. You've got a metric that you think every business owner should obsess over. Which one is that?
Yeah, so it's the labor efficiency ratio. And so we specialize in the service-based industry. So it's always some type of markup of labor that's going to basically allow you the biggest lever to pull to increase profits. And so for us, obviously there's so many things. And when you look at a P&L that might be 100 line items long, a lot of that business owners, especially the people that are not financially minded, which I feel like majority are not, because they get in the business with entrepreneurial world to like go sell a product. If you get in that world and you're looking, how do I reduce this down to the best lever I can pull? Our belief in the service-based industry is definitely that labor efficiency ratio. So happy to dive into details of that, of what that looks like, but that's the key factor for us.
Your businesses technically don't have gross profit. Because if you're in a service business, you generally like total income and gross profit tend to be the same. Is that what you notice in most of your businesses?
Well,
or do you do it
Yes and no.
differently?
Some of our
Depends.
business, that's right, just depends. So some of them, absolutely. They have subcontractors, they have materials that are all pass through accounts essentially the second they sell
Okay.
revenue. And then we have others that literally use their own manpower to go produce exactly what they're selling. So it's a combination of both.
So when I do labor efficiency ratio, I take total cost of labor and I divide it into gross profit. Is that what you do?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. What do you find are good ratios when you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the sweet spot is typically too, it's crazy how many industries come down to for every dollar that you pay, and this is total labor, that's admin people, this is taxes on that labor, this is everything it takes to actually have people in-house working for you, contractors, all of it. If you have it for every dollar that you pay out in that total labor, if you can produce $2 in gross profit, typically you're going to see the profit margins. And that's going to ebb and flow 2.2 or 1.8, depending on certain industries. But the fun thing for us is that it allows us to start showing our clients, look, you know what your payroll is going to be every 2 weeks, or maybe you know what you're paying out contractors on top of that. So now you just got to group things together in this number to say like, okay, every time I pay this out, this is what it is. And if that labor didn't produce a multiple of what I just paid out, then we need things to tweak, right? And they can tweak on pricing. We can start cutting people like you just said. I mean, it's a combination of both to really hone in on that number.
And I love that. That comes from Simple Numbers from Greg Crabtree.
That's
And
right.
surprise, he's going to be joining us very soon. So
Oh, no way.
we'll be digging into that.
That's
And
right.
one of the things though he talks about is and he deals with a lot of larger companies, but and I also do this for my companies, we pull the owner out of the labor ratio. So I'll do it with and without the owner so they can see their impact because they're not always paid depending on how they're paid.
Yeah.
But if you've got a management team, then I'm thinking you've got your direct labor ratio, which too is definitely it. But then also looking at your management ratio and saying, hey, is my management actually driving gross profit
That's
and
exactly right.
dollars as well? And so there's a variety of ways to look at this. But I think the key really comes down to what you said. I can take a 100-line P&L and break it down to 3 or 4, maybe 5 categories and some basic ratios. And just on that simple scoreboard, you can run your business, right? Because if you look at a scoreboard in sports, they're not showing you a million things. They're
That's
showing
exactly right.
you kind of the things that drive results. And so that's kind of the key. What are the things that are going to drive results in here?
Yeah, that's great.
I'm always a big fan of having a weekly meeting and a short weekly meeting because some of y'all you don't even have meetings, which means you're constantly having meetings because people are constantly interrupting you to get stuff done. Let's talk about the weekly meeting. What's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, it's funny, Rocky. You get the whole realm of people, no meetings to over meetings, all in the world of small business. We obviously, the only reason to ever meet is you want it to be efficient and impactful, right? And so for us, we have a weekly meeting every Monday at 10:30. And so we actually had it this morning since yesterday was Labor Day, but it's really to align the company on the critical data that is the scoreboard. And so Rocky, I love the analogy of saying like when you're a football player on the field, you're not looking at what's my average running back's average yards per carry or all the different stats that somebody's collecting as they're watching the game. You literally look up and you can see how much time's left in the game, who's ahead or who's losing, and what down is, right? And so it's the critical data that every team player needs to see is our business winning or losing and who's responsible for getting it back into a winnable game, right? And so we go over 5 sets of criteria in that weekly meeting every single Monday. And so it starts with sales. They're the lead side. Like, what are we doing to generate new customers coming in the door? Like, what are we tracking on a lead measure, not a lag measure, to make sure? And one other comment before I get into these 5, Rocky, is that a lot of times with P&Ls or balance sheets or any of these financial metrics that people are tracking, they're always lag measures, right? So you close the month out, you've already done the work. Now all of a sudden you get your report and you're like, okay, here's where adjustments can be made, but there's nothing you can do about what's on the paper because it's already been done. So we try to focus every Monday on what are lead measures that we know are going to produce results that are ultimately going to change the game for that P&L that we're going to receive a month from now. So in those 5, first one is making sure what are we tracking to make sure leads are coming in the door. The second one is new customers coming into our ecosystem. What are we doing to make sure that they're getting the best experience possible as a first impression into the flywheel world, right? So that's what we're tracking to make sure that we're delivering well there. The third one is operations. So, like, what are we doing consistently to make sure that we're having the biggest impact on our product or service that we're selling? The fourth one is cash. So that comes right directly into cash flow, AR, who's behind, what do we need to track to make sure that we're not struggling from a cash flow standpoint. So that needs to be tracked every single week, not once a month when you get your AR report. And then the fifth and final one is what they call Queen Bee Roll. And all this came from a book called,
Clockwork.
Yeah, we talked about earlier. Clockwork, from the same guy who wrote Profit First. But that fifth one is Queen Bee Roll. And it's basically, what's the one thing that kind of builds culture on your team that everybody can do that has the biggest impact on your customers? And so for us, we know that one of the things we're always going to stand on is great customer service and response times. So we have a metric inside of every one of our team members' emails that says, like, how quickly did you respond to any customer engagement and customer responses? And we're tracking that response time to make sure that we're always delivering good customer service and having good response times. So you just got to think that the beauty of this is that it builds the framework, but it's very unique to the business, right? So you have to sit in each one of those 5 areas, and it doesn't have to be just 5, but those are the 5 that we've kind of adopted from the book that we can hone in on and say, like, what's unique to us to make sure that we're winning.
And I use a lot of stuff from Traction, the EOS book, and they have scorecards as well. What I have found, though, because a lot of times I'll come in after they implement versus before. And if I come in after they implement, I'll look at their scorecard and I go, if you multiply out your scorecard, it's not going to hit your goal. So everybody's hitting their score, but the business owner isn't hitting their score because they didn't bother to make sure that everything actually created the result that you wanted to happen.
Great point.
And that's a big part. When we can get the data, and we can't always get all of the data, you show me all the metrics, I'll show you the result, and then we can break it down to a weekly scorecard and be able to do that. Again, adapt it to your business, what works for you, and how to make sure that you're hitting those particular goals.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rocky. I think that is a massive missing piece for someone that does implement and get all excited about a lead measure scorecard, is that you have to make sure it produces the lag measures that you expect. And so for us, I mean, we try to do sprints and like a Traction. I can't remember, I read that book years ago, but we try to do it in 90-day sprints, quarterly sprints. And so we're like, okay, we'll make a decision and we'll sprint for 90 days to say, like, okay, the decision that we made or the lead measure that we want to track, we'll do it at least for 90 days, evaluate the results, come back from that and say, is this something that we continue to do? Or is it something that we need to adjust and pivot from? But we have to try it for at least 90 days to see if it produces fruit.
That come from the 12-week year?
Yes, that's where it came from. Yep. I see all those books back there. We've read a lot of the same ones. So that's exactly right.
Look, you can make your own mistakes, or you can take from each of these books 1 or 2 things and implement them in your business. And the next thing you know, you've got a really good business. And that's what we do. I constantly reread all these books.
Yep.
And we are always going back to basics to say, okay, let's evaluate our clients. Do we have the right measures for everybody? Is there a measure that we were using that we forgot about? Because we veer too. Always coming back to baseline and making sure that we're always doing that. So, and every time you read it, you get a different take. You miss something the first time, or what seemed unimportant now all of a sudden seems important.
That's a great point. And honestly, Rocky, the same thing, even on the flip side of that, what seems incredible and important in a book that you read, you might implement and then realize you did it for 90 days and nobody's even looking at that number. It just gets glazed over every team meeting, And then you're like, well, shoot, if we're not even looking at it, then it's either not that important to us or we need to evaluate what we're tracking to make sure it is important to us.
Okay, besides you and me, isn't everyone else just glazing over at the number?
Well, this is what makes it fun for us, Rocky. This is what I try to do for engagement in our team meetings. Every single person on our team has a responsible thing to track, and they're the ones that import that data into the spreadsheet that's shareable, that we present on a Zoom call, And so each time we go to those different 5 areas, we're calling out people. It's not just me reporting the whole thing and saying yes or no, and people are falling asleep on the meeting. It's like they're the ones that have to say, like, this is in the red or this is in the green. And if it's in the red, this is the reason why.
I got to put more red and green back in. We used to use a lot more red and green. And I keep changing things, but we'll probably put some more red and green back in. The other thing we do is we highlight the entire rows. And so you can see visually what's up, what's down. We constantly do that.
Yeah.
And we use red and green, just so that it just draws people's eyes to go, "Oh, that's what's going well, that's what's not." You don't have to glaze over it. It's super easy to see what's going on. So after you do all this wonderful stuff, what are the biggest issues you still see business owners deal with?
Yeah, I mean, we have a job because a lot of business owners hate numbers and hate finances, but it's like the scoreboard. If you think about, and going back to what we talked about earlier, when you want to sell your company or whatever you want to evaluate your company as, or how the value of what it currently sits, it 100% has to do with the numbers of that business, right? You know this as well as anybody. And so for us, so many, especially early on in small business, people just are making decisions based off the number they see in their bank account, and they're just gunslinging, right? So they're trying to get customers. They're trying to maybe hire a team once they get a few customers, but they have no clue how to accurately price. So many things are gut feeling and not like actual analysis and numbers based. And so that's probably the biggest issue we see when we welcome people into our system is that it's like, let us do this for you so that you can accurately go grow based on true data that you have, and accurately go hire people based on true data that you have to ultimately hit the profits that you want to hit. Because so many small businesses, and we're all guilty of this, is that you're like, man, I'm going to have so much freedom running my own business, and I'm going to get all this stuff. You know, it's like, well, I'm going to be my own boss and all these things. And then all of a sudden you're working way more hours for way less pay you were making at the W-2 job, right? You have to have a team of people that are supporting you in a way to say like, okay, if this stuff's not working, we got to make adjustments along the way to improve. And we try to provide that for our clients.
How long do you wait before making an adjustment?
That's a great question, Rocky. Give me an example of what you're talking about. Because there's like so many, if depends on what the situation.
Let's keep it simple. You've got a scorecard, right? 1 week you get red. You're not going to make a change, right?
That's
Because
right.
1 week you might wonder what happened. Now you got 4 weeks in the red. You making a change, like listening to 4 weeks of excuses. When are you like going, hey, something's got to change?
Yeah, so internally for us, and going back to the scoreboard, and this is why I love the green or red, we can see all the weeks are in columns and all of our criteria that we're tracking are in rows, right? So we can see trends of how long something's been in the green, how long has it been there, where the reds have fallen through, and did it get back to green quickly? So for us, if things have been in the red for once it hits that third mark, that's when we're diving in to say like, okay, everything in business is either a people problem or a process problem. And I'm always going to default to process first. So what I try to have conversations with our guys is if we see consistent red, I'm going to immediately go in and say like, where in the process are you following it to get the results of red? And then if we know that the process is incorrect, then we fix the process, right? Because it's not producing what we want it to produce. But if someone goes in there and says like, here's the process that I followed and I'm getting red consistently, and I know this because they're not following the process, then we know it's a people problem. And that's when we're having conversations on the coaching side to say, you know, and I'm not going to fire someone off after 3 weeks, right? Unless it's something catastrophic. No. But you look at those things to say like, can we coach them up because they need to be following the process better? Or is this person a long-term play in that seat on this bus? And where do we need to transition?
How many businesses come to you with a process in place?
Depends on the owner. I can't blanket say not many, but I mean, from a financial process, hardly any, because we come in needing to do that for them, right? But there's it just depends on the owner. That's what I'm learning. Anything about a business encapsulates the personality of the owner, right? And so when the owner is fully scatterbrained, then you're not going to have any processes in that business, right? And so for us, we're trying to understand the personality traits and the vision of what the owner's doing to then know how can we obviously play in our financial lane of that business. But to me, that's kind of the things I've seen as people have come into our world.
How often do owners get tired of you because you keep trying to hold them to a process?
Well, I think, once again, I go back to the financial lane of where we're running, right? And so much of it comes down to labor efficiency, like I mentioned earlier, pricing accurately to either handle that labor and or remove the labor side. And some people get it and they see it, and some people never will. And they choose to never will, right? And that's not even correct.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Those.
So for those, the sad part about it, Rocky, and this is the nature of our business, and I talk about this with our team all the time, the people that are not willing to adjust based on the work that we're doing, we're not going to be working together long, right? And you've experienced this too, I'm sure, Rocky, but it's like, if you hired us to do a job, but you're not willing to make any tweaks based on the job that we're doing, then why are we working together? And the sad part is I've probably been the one that stayed around too long trying to say like, okay, here's the stuff, here's the stuff, here's the stuff. And then no progress was made. And then they're the ones that let us go because it's this combination of trying to figure out, okay, if you're willing to, let us do our job and let us own the financial side because we're really, really good at it, and then show you what to work on and tweak and make adjustments on, then it's going to be a great relationship because it's the whole who, not how concept, right? I'm sure you've read that book too, but we try
Yes.
to be the who for the how of finance, right? And so if people don't, if they don't want to play that game and they still want to get into QuickBooks every day, even though that's our job to do that, or do tweaks and things their own way, it's ultimately messing up the processes that we've built. It's just not going to be a good long-term relationship.
No, I get that. Very few of my business owners, almost none, want to go into QuickBooks unless they're just going to look. And that's a rarity even at that. So
Yeah.
most of them just want the data sent to them, and most of them don't even know how to get in. So that's perfectly fine. Find your who.
That's right.
Make it work.
That's
Is there
exactly
anything else we should have talked about but didn't get a chance to?
No, I mean the other thing and we talked about this a little earlier before the podcast, but I'm just trying to add value to business owners, and so I'm new to the Instagram game, but I'm putting stuff out there every single day to try to let people think about, here's how I think about certain things. Maybe this is a way that you could potentially think about it in the service-based industries. If anybody wants to just go get free content that I'm trying to produce out there, you can just follow my personal Instagram handle. It's Austin D. McMillan on Instagram. And in fact, we've actually created a PDF that shows people, similar to the Profit First method. We have our own version of that, but shows any business owner how to set up your bank accounts to start prioritizing profit, just like you mentioned in the Profit First. It's a quick and easy how-to PDF one-pager. And so we've created that. If anybody's interested in that, they can find me on Instagram and just message the word profit to me, and we'll send that little PDF over and hopefully get you at least setting up your bank accounts correctly to start forcing profit in your business. So you can actually start making some money.
There you go. If people would like to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
All on Instagram. Yeah, I try to be very, very present there. And so you can shoot me a direct message on Instagram. Just go find me there, and hopefully we can, help you out in some way.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome, Rocky. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening to the entire unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. You can actually get the full podcast in audio only format here on YouTube or any other of your favorite podcast players. Don't forget to go check out episodes 1 through 13. They lay out the foundation of Profit First in the book and how to get started. In addition, we've got hundreds of episodes for you to check out. And if you remember to subscribe, you'll always be updated when we put a new one out every single week. Thanks for listening. Have a profitable week.